Welcome to Take a Breath, a podcast for creating practical calm in the messy middle of midlife. I'm Polly, and this is your space to pause. Because life in midlife is full on, between work, family, menopause, and the mental load, your nervous system can easily end up in constant overdrive, leaving you feeling exhausted, reactive, and overwhelmed by even the smallest things. Each week, I'll share my own tools alongside honest conversations and practical nervous system support to help you create more calm, peace, joy, and inner steadiness. So whenever you're ready, let's take a breath in through the nose, feel your belly rise, your ribs expand, and as you exhale, let's begin. Hello and welcome back to Take a Breath. Now, if you're like me, your family might be in the throes of exam season. Oh my goodness, it's so tough for everybody in a household, I think, when kids have exams. So my daughter is doing her GCSEs. She's right in the middle of them, and bless her, she is working really hard, and she's one of these children who finds exams challenging, to say the least. And I think so many young people find exams challenging. I did have my eldest child who didn't. He excels in exams, but I don't think he's the norm. So if you're a parent and you are supporting your child through exams, I totally know how difficult that can be, because you just want them to be as relaxed and calm as possible, but equally you want them to do the best that they possibly can so they get some grades that they're proud of. So sending you so much love, and remember, just keep breathing, slow, calm breaths, because it will be over before you know it. I can't wait. I don't know who's more excited, me or my daughter. Anyway, today I want to talk you through a recent realization of mine, because I feel like I'm actually having a full circle moment right now. If you've been listening to this podcast for a number of years, or if you've been following me for a while on Instagram, you'll know that I left my teaching job, nearly 10 years ago now. I can't believe that. And that was actually teaching in a school. And I think I left it, when I look back with hindsight, because of perimenopause, although I did not realize that at the time. But this is where everything really started for me. It was the beginning of me waking up to realizing that there was so much more to life than I actually realized. And it sounds really blimmin' cheesy to say this, but it really was the start of a bit of an awakening for me. And since then, it's as if I've been following the breadcrumbs of life that have been laid down in front of me. And I finally feel like it's all beginning to make a little bit of sense. So this all began for me it was about 2016, 10 years ago, when I left my teaching job in a primary school. Now, I'd left my job as a teacher because at the time I genuinely felt like, I wasn't really enjoying it at all anymore. I felt like I was failing everyone. The kids that I was teaching, and as well as my own 3 children, because when you're a teacher, you miss out on all the things that your own children are doing at school. And I started to really resent this, as well as the children I was working with. I felt like I wasn't able to give them my all because I was always rushing back home to be with my children. And so I was just getting really frustrated about that, as well as the whole of our education system in this country. There was so much paperwork, which just seemed a little bit pointless. The atmosphere in schools was not a very happy one. So I just felt like, okay, I've done my time. It's time for me to move on. But I think the thing which I was just yearning for so much was to have freedom. When you teach in schools, you are bound by the holidays, by the timetable of the school day. There was no space for my own time. You had to fit in around that. And I found that so frustrating, as well as the fact that any fun of the job was totally being squeezed out, which is such a shame because I know so many good teachers who have left the profession as well. But I was also totally exhausted. I was irritable. I wasn't sleeping well. I was in my early 40s at the time, and I really did have no idea that all of this was also probably because I was entering perimenopause. At this point, so 10 years ago, I'd never even heard the word perimenopause. This was before the huge wave of awareness that we have now, before the brilliant Davina McCall started talking about it, before everyone started talking about their hormones and all of the things that go with it. So I ended up buying a tuition franchise. I thought, okay, I can do the teaching. I'd always wanted to start my own business. So I felt like a tuition business would be a really great way of doing this, to kind of give me the framework of starting a new business. It would help me, show me the way, but I would have that freedom I was so craving. So at the time, I was setting up a business. I had my own 3 small children. My husband was working away a lot. And without my knowledge, I was in the thick of perimenopause. Yet from the outside, for anyone looking in, I still looked pretty capable. But inside, I felt anything but. I felt completely rubbish, a little bit like a swan calmly floating down the river on the surface, whilst furiously paddling underneath. And if you listen to the very first episode of this podcast, when it was known as the Positive Perimenopause podcast, you will hear my whole experience at that time. And I remember it feeling so vulnerable sharing that first episode. I was so worried what people would think and what my family would think, what my friends would think. But it's actually the most downloaded episode of this podcast, and the episode I've also received so many messages about, because I think it helped others make sense of their own experience. Back then, no one was really talking about perimenopause or menopause. And so it really, I think, struck a chord with a lot of people. So eventually I discovered I was perimenopause. I was so frustrated and cross and angry that I hadn't known anything about it, that I threw myself into learning about it. It's amazing to think how far we've come actually since then, because I think everybody knows about perimenopause now. So, I mean, which is absolutely brilliant. But at the time, I didn't know anything about it. So alongside my tuition business, I read so much. I listened to so many podcasts. I also did a training in becoming a health and a life coach. And then when the pandemic hit, because my tuition business was very much in person, I did try to take it online, but absolutely hated it, as did the kids I was working with. I just trained in more wellness stuff. So I trained in hypnotherapy, I trained in EFT. I got a real taste for learning about how to become a better version of myself and how to break unhelpful, limiting beliefs that I suddenly realized I had quite a lot of. And then eventually, through all of that training, I stumbled on breathwork, on nervous system work, and that has brought me really here today. And whilst I was doing all this learning, I also started helping other women too. And eventually I decided that I was done with teaching the kids, and instead I decided that I really wanted to work with adults. So I launched the Positive Perimenopause podcast, which did really well when I look back. I interviewed some amazing experts, and the podcast grew very quickly. I think because at that time, people wanted to know. People were so relieved to find out there wasn't something really wrong with them. So I also built online programs, supported women one-to-one. I just learned so much through that whole experience. It was a real time of huge growth, of awareness. And yeah, it was a really important time for me. When I think back, I loved the deeper conversations I was having with women around identity, around confidence, around growth and transformation, what I didn't really love talking about at the time were the physical symptoms of perimenopause. I was asked so often about things like, what supplements should I take? What's happening with my periods? What's happening with my skin? Sort of real physical things which was going on. And of course, all of those things are really important and they really matter. But I didn't want to talk about them. Maybe I had a bit of imposter syndrome because I'm not medically trained, but I realized that side of things just really wasn't my wheelhouse. And I think that slightly turned me away from wanting to constantly be talking about perimenopause and menopause. What fascinated me most was this idea that perimenopause is a wake-up call and could actually be an opportunity. It made sense to me that perimenopause reveals stuff which is under the surface, which is often sugar-coated, if you like, by the hormones estrogen and progesterone. I will only ever recommend brands that I know, love and use myself. And one of those is Ancient and Brave. Honestly, they've become part of my daily habits. The very first thing I do every morning is pour myself a big glass of water with their true hydration in it. It feels like such a simple ritual, but it really sets me up for the day. And I know I'm properly rehydrating with their blend of electrolytes and minerals, especially before I exercise, which I always do in the morning. Then later on, when I make my coffee, I stir in their true collagen powder into the coffee. Now, it blends in straight away, no fuss, there's no taste, and collagen is something we naturally lose as we age, but it's so important for our skin, joints, and overall vitality. Now, I'll be honest, Ancient and Brave may cost a little more than some of the tubs you'll spot on supermarket shelves, but the difference is you're getting the highest quality ingredients, sourced with integrity and tested to a higher standard, and absolutely no nasties added. That's why I trust them and why I think they're worth every penny. And because I want you to be able to try them out for yourself, I've got a special offer for you. As a listener of this podcast, you can get 20% off your very first order. All you need to do is click the link in the show notes and pop in the code POLYW20 at checkout. They've got more than just collagen and hydration too. They've got creatine, they've got blends, supplements. So it's a perfect chance to explore their range and make the most of that 20% off. So that's when I actually changed the podcast name to Menomorphosis, because I felt that word, that name felt so much more aligned with what I was experiencing. That yes, perimenopause can be incredibly difficult, but it can also be a time where you can start to change stuff, and that you can question how you're spending your time, how you can start to look at the relationship with yourself. That's a really big one. My relationship with myself was pretty awful. That you can start to look at how you are moving through life, whether you're on autopilot or not. And I know for me, this is when I really started to think about my purpose in life, that I started to realize how fast life was going. And actually, this was a real opportunity to craft my life, to create my life in the way that I wanted to do. And I was finding that the women that I was talking to felt exactly the same. And honestly, at that time, I found a huge amount of confidence with what I was doing. I started speaking up more. Instagram was something which I felt so unbelievably uncomfortable with initially, but I started to do some lives with my friend Lucy to try and challenge ourselves to get more used to showing up, putting ourselves out there, not caring what I looked like, not caring with, not worrying constantly about how I might come across. Trusting myself more. That's been a massive one. It still is, learning to trust myself and just trying stuff out, trying things out. Not all of them, by the way, worked. I once launched a program actually called Menomorphosis, which was to try and help women through menopause and this whole change of midlife. And I did a workshop. Some people did actually turn up to the workshop, but then I was hoping that people were going to sign up to this. I think it was like a 6-month program. And I think one person signed up, just one. So that was a bit of like, oh God, this is really not that easy, and it can be very humbling. But even though some things failed, some things didn't fail. And I've loved working particularly with women one-to-one. Stick with me. There is a reason why I'm telling you all of this, because I think the thing which I noticed more than anything, which kept cropping up again and again and again, was how stress showed up consistently with every single person I spoke to, who I was working with. And even though those women who were so-called taking charge of their perimenopause, so that they were on HRT, they were changing their diet, they were beginning to change the way they exercise, to have more weight training, they were still experiencing symptoms from perimenopause. They might have improved a bit, but they were still there, or they were returning. And the thing I just kept coming back to was stress. Chronic, relentless nervous system overload, basically. That is because we as midlife women are carrying so much. I've said this so many times, we all know it. We are in that sandwich generation where we've got a lot going on. And as women, we are also generally, this is very generally speaking, but we're the ones who hold it all. We do our career, do our jobs, but we also tend to be, and again, it's not the same for everyone, but we tend to be the primary caregivers for our families. We tend to be the ones who are looking after our households, in charge of all the WhatsApp groups, the admin, appointments, you name it. We tend to do all of it. And so we're holding everything together whilst at the same time sacrificing our own needs. And I know that is what I was doing for quite some time. And then we throw in the fluctuating hormones of perimenopause into the middle of all of that. And yes, it's no wonder why it can feel like a lot. And I know for me, that is what was happening. And I felt like I was going completely and utterly crazy. But I'd normalized it like most of us do. I thought that being permanently on was just who I was, just the way it had to be. I thought that we just had to push through, that we just had to hold it together. But actually, I was just running mostly on adrenaline, on caffeine. I was totally ignoring my exhaustion and how that felt in my body. And really, my release button was getting so drunk on a Friday night with my husband. We've always said Friday night was catch-up night to have some fun. And it has been, and it was fun. But also looking back now, we used to get totally properly drunk. And I think it was because both of us needed that real release, because we were both holding so much. And maybe we could get away with that before perimenopause and the changing of hormones. But when perimenopause comes, that doesn't feel the same anymore. Suddenly the things we used to tolerate, they just don't feel tolerable anymore. And a hangover is definitely one of those things. It's amazing, isn't it, how you just can't seem to tolerate a hangover anymore. You can feel anxious as well, totally irritable, pissed off of everyone, snappy at everyone. Sleep becomes horrendous and just feeling tense all the time. And this is genuinely the part I don't think we talk about enough, that perimenopause makes the nervous system far more sensitive to stress. It really does. And there's actually, a physiological reason for that. So we have these hormonal changes, and what they're doing is they're reducing our resilience and our buffering capacity in a nervous system that's often already completely overloaded. So most of us now know that estrogen and progesterone, our sex hormones, have a huge influence on the brain, on mood, on sleep, on our emotional regulation. But perhaps we're not so aware of their influence on our nervous systems. So estrogen particularly plays a regulatory role in the autonomic nervous system. So what that means is that it helps maintain balance between your sympathetic and parasympathetic branches. That's hugely important, because if we don't have that buffering, we won't switch between those two states easily. So if you want to know more about our nervous system states, go back a few episodes and you'll find loads of, I think there's like 3 or 4 different podcast episodes about our nervous system and what a regulated nervous system looks like and what it doesn't. But estrogen is super important in the role of our autonomic nervous system, and it also supports vagal tone. So that basically means the strength and the flexibility of our vagus nerve, which is one of the major nerves which is involved in calming the body after stress. So when we have good vagal tone, that means really healthy vagus nerve. Basically, the nervous system returns to a really lovely calm baseline after it's been activated. So that helps you to recover after you've been really super stressed. So it helps you, if you get really stressed, you want to come back to that parasympathetic side of your nervous systems. Estrogen really helps you do that. It helps you to emotionally regulate and really shift out of anxiety states so much more easily. But when we have fluctuating hormones and our estrogen is declining, that can totally disrupt this balance. And research has backed this up. So that is why we can experience at this time a huge increase in our sympathetic activation. So that means we're in our fight or flight state much more of the time, which means that we've got a reduced parasympathetic activity. So we've got less opportunity for rest and recovery. It also alters our cortisol regulation. So how much cortisol is being released at any one time. And it basically gives us greater physiological sensitivity to stress. So the nervous system just becomes much more reactive and less resilient. And that is why it feels like you're struggling to cope with things that you used to be able to cope with. But that's also why you get things like palpitations, or you feel like your heart is racing, or you're just getting that anxiety out of nowhere. It just keeps us in that fight or flight state more of the time. And because progesterone also declines, which normally has a really calming effect on the body loses another layer of its sort of nervous system soothing. And that's why we didn't notice the impact of stress so much before perimenopause, because estrogen and progesterone, when they're working as they should, they do a brilliant job at cushioning the impact of stress. So we don't realize that we're holding so much stress. But during perimenopause, we notice all of that stress. What we have now is a nervous system that has become more biologically sensitive and less buffered at the exact stage of life when the demands on us are often the highest. It really isn't fair, is it? The nervous system literally has less capacity for sustained stress and less efficiency in recovering from it. And I think this distinction is so important, because it shows us that actually it's not that we're not coping, which often I think we can very easily be led to think. It's actually that we have a nervous system that is operating under very different biological conditions than it was 10 years or 20 years earlier. The analogy I always think of about when I think about this is it's a bit like driving a car. It's always good. Cars are always good analogies. So it's a bit like driving a car with really good suspension. When the suspension is working well, you can still feel the bumps in the road, but they don't completely throw you off course. The car absorbs a load of the impact for you. But during perimenopause, it's almost like that suspension system starts to wear down. So suddenly every bump feels so much harder. You really do feel every pothole. It really hits so much harder. So the same road that you've driven for years feels exhausting. It feels so much more difficult. Life itself might not have changed dramatically, but your nervous system no longer has the same hormonal buffering and resilience it once did. And if your body has already spent decades in chronic stress, so if you've been someone who has been constantly pushing or over-functioning and you're just switched on all the time, perimenopause is going to amplify that even further. It's like perimenopause removes that protective layer that was helping you compensate against stress. It basically reveals the stress your body has been carrying for ages, for years even. And I think for me, that really was a massive turning point. When I stopped trying to just simply manage symptoms and instead started to learn how to regulate my nervous system, things really do change quite significantly. I began recognizing how activated my system actually was and how much tension I was carrying in my body all of the time and how I never was able to properly switch off. And I think once I started working with my nervous system, with my breath, things really began shifting in it, really like in a way that nothing else seemed to touch. I do believe that, it all starts with that awareness. And I just noticed that I wasn't as snappy, I wasn't as irritated or pissed off all the time. I felt like actually finally I was able to get a handle on it. And that's really what has led me so deeply into the work I do today. So the breathwork and the nervous system regulation work. Because what that does, that instead of living constantly in survival mode, it slowly starts to teach your body what safety feels like again. And that sounds pretty deep. It's like, of course I feel safe. But actually, when we are constantly on, our body doesn't believe it's safe. So we have to retrain it to feel like it is safe. And I think this is one of the missing pieces in the perimenopause conversation. Because you cannot separate the nervous system from the whole perimenopause experience. Because if you think about it, if your body has been spending so many years again and again experiencing pressure, experiencing urgency, hyper responsibility, all the things that most of us do experience as we go through life, and then particularly as we go through midlife, or if you've got families and all that comes with that, your body learns from repetition. So what happens is that feeling of pressure, of urgency, of hyper responsibility, that begins to feel normal. And instead, that feeling of calm, that can actually start to feel really unfamiliar. So that is why nervous system support really does matter so much at this time, because your body is asking for a different relationship with stress now. But the good news is that your nervous system can change, which is great. If you can learn to become stressed, you can learn to become unstressed. Your nervous system can change. So your body can relearn how it feels to feel calm. What it needs to do is to relearn what it feels like to feel safe, to feel regulated. So it can relearn all of these things. And when we start to properly support the nervous system, then so many symptoms of perimenopause are going to improve. Your sleep will improve, your focus, your patience, your mood, all of this will improve. You will experience less anxiety. You'll just start to feel so much more like yourself again, because your body will no longer feel under that constant threat. So it really is that missing piece of the puzzle often, which is overlooked. We do all the things, we do all the strength training, we change our diet, we eat the protein, we can take the supplements, we can do all the things, we can take the HRT. But if we're doing all of that on a really activated nervous system, we're not going to feel all the benefits. So this is really like the underlying piece, which I truly believe is what we really need to be doing as probably one of the first pieces of the puzzle. And this is something I know I wished I knew much earlier, and I want all women to know this because it's not difficult to retrain your nervous system. Yes, you need to be consistent with the practice, but you don't need hours and hours in the day. We all have our breath with us at all times. It's something that you can do using your breath. The breath is such a big part of this, but we can do use lots of other techniques as well to support our nervous system. We literally just have to remind ourselves what calm feels like, and then over time your body adapts. We are so amazing at adapting, but without taking those small steps to show it, nothing's going to change. So if this feels like something that you could do with, then please do go and check out my website. I've got lots of offers on there. Good place to start. And then obviously if you want to take it much deeper, you can get in touch with me. I love working one-to-one, or come and join the inner space. That's kind of like a consistent practice where we're constantly doing this work as well. This really does make a big difference. I hope you've got something out of this episode. If you have, please do let me know. I'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions, please do send me an email. I'd love to hear it, and I will always do my best to answer it as well as I can. Take care. Thanks again. Lots of love. Bye. Before you go, just to let you know that you'll find a selection of gentle, practical offers at really accessible prices over on my website. They're all designed to support your everyday breathing, to ease anxiety, and help you build a more resilient, flexible nervous system so you can feel calmer and bring a little more steadiness into your daily life. Everything I share is designed to meet you where you are and to fit into real busy lives. Just go to pollywarren.com and click on the resource library. If you'd like to stay connected between episodes, you can also find me over on Instagram at Polly Warren Coaching. This is where I share simple reminders and tools and reflections to help you come back to calm throughout the week. And if you're enjoying Take a Breath, it would mean so much if you could take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. It really does help this podcast reach more women who might need a little space to breathe too. Thank you so much for being here and for taking this time for yourself. And remember, sometimes all you need to do is take a breath.